Okay, so we are beginning now with the IPS Discord think tank review. And what I'm doing is I'm going through every day's activities, covering the last 8 days since I've been absent on my 10-day retreat. And so I want to begin with December 10th and then from there, because I have not touched social media. I haven't logged into my Twitter, and this is my first time accessing Discord since then. So I'm entirely out of the loop. And part of this is to make the point that if you disappear from the media ecosystem and just live your life on the earth, breathe the air, touch the grass, etc., when you come back, if you've already come to an understanding of the off-world stage perspective, then it's going to be very easy to pick up where you left off if you care to. It's not like you're going to forget your perspective, even if you don't know what in particular is going on. And perspective is everything. And once you've moved to the off-world stage perspective, you're essentially inoculated against staged, simulated events, psyops, and all of their implications. So I'm very comfortable taking time off. We're not chasing headlines. This isn't clickbait, engagement bait, rage bait, and we're not competing with the alt media cesspool. This is a completely outside of the box, away from the mass media duopoly perspective. So on December 10th, 7:07 p.m., I will be going on a writing vacation, taking a winter break. It's not even winter yet. Oh, no, pre-winter break. Okay. Kevin Mooring had asked, does anyone expect a big psyop in the next week? The 19th has been promoted in all angles. Freemasons, skull and bones. So, yeah. Okay, I'm looking forward to tomorrow. He also said, don't worry, the raft will still float. Yeah, precisely. The participants in this already know what's going on, and you can't really stop this. And when you have enough of us gathered in one place, it becomes a fake news wood chipper. Have a great break, says Busy56. Has been so far. Okay, continuing. We're still on December the 10th. Okay, here we go. Lean Dion posted, Autism Capital's Twitter feed says, oh, it's a link to Elon Musk. He said, quote, they modeled Iron Man in the movies after me. Robert Downey Jr. and Jon Favreau met with me and toured SpaceX. A large part of Iron Man 2 is filmed in SpaceX. We had Scarlett Johansson doing martial arts in the lobby. Actually, how is this not a simulation? Now, that's got some intriguing implications. Scarlett Johansson, if we go into the movie Asteroid City and how that connects to the Fly Me to the Moon. Because remember, Scarlett Johansson was in the movie about faking the moon landing. So this is all really interesting. And this archetype she represents in these films tie into Marjorie Cameron, aka the Babylon from the Babylon Working, the designated priestess. And that has a great deal of significance to the concept of what SpaceX is really about, because it is space sex. Ultimately, this is a pagan cult that worships the generative principles and all that stuff. So, very interesting tweet there. And I will bookmark it so I can actually listen to him saying this. Plain Decoded says on December 15th, TPUSA will be refuting Candace Owens' claims on a live stream, and she'll be living that event live. Oh, okay. That's good. And I'm hearing a lot from Normieville about how bad Erica Kirk is. And I predicted this on September 11th, the day after, when we talked about that Tempest TV show, how the widow would take over, fake her grief to win over the constituency of her dead husband, assassinated husband, shot in the left side of the neck, and that she would be accused of not only faking her grief, but possibly being the architect of her husband's assassination for reasons of usurping his position and gaining political power overall. So it looks to me like people are participating in a manufactured soap opera. And I say that not to be hyperbolic, but quite literally. Candace Owens, Erica Kirk, these are soap opera characters. Let's stop pretending they're real. Let's stop pretending they're not playing roles. We all know that Erica Kirk and Charlie Kirk didn't have any children. I don't know if they rented those, if they're AI, but they are not a real family. They never were. Fake as her tears. Psyobstacles posted Bezos and Musk race to bring data centers to space. Space companies backed by tech billionaires hope to move AI data centers off Earth. Now, why is there a race to do this? Sounds like Skynet. And we are entering something that, I mean, we talk about fakery, the fact that we live in this hyper reality and everything's subjective, and most of what they do is just bluffing, intimidation, Psywar. But out of all of their various scenarios, the AI thing seems to be pretty much coming true as per the movies. And I would suggest that all of the years, the decades, a century plus of alien invasion themed science fiction has been promulgated for the sole purpose of preparing us for a higher intelligence taking over. Well, it doesn't have to come from Mars or Venus or whatever. The intelligence that's taking over isn't going to be aliens, it's going to be AI. And I think they've conditioned us to accept that this would unite humanity. And the alien invasion that we've all been awaiting isn't going to happen. It's going to be AI, which some people will believe it's aliens or demons, but yeah, that's what's coming. Lloyd said, what really teed her off was Milo wanting to see Charlie's grave. She basically lost it. Maybe she's in on the death fakery voluntarily or not. Afraid of the fakery will be exposed? Question mark. What is he referring to? Oh, yes. Milo Yiannopoulos was casting doubts as to whether he was killed, kind of in a very flippant way, but also wanting to know where the grave is. And they say they can't show where the grave is because it will get a bunch of vandalism and stuff, which is a crime. I don't believe that's true. I think it wouldn't be difficult to defend something like that. They should have at least made the effort. Okay, let's see here. How come no one goes into the voice channel anymore, says Kevin Mooring. Pete Tripper says, dude, I would. I always want to talk woo-woo IPS shit. We are actually the opposite of woo here. I've been doing nothing but demystifying psyops, simulation crap, Mandela crap, chemtrail superstition, and I've really been pushing back against various religious paradigms. So actually, if you're looking for woo, this is going to be a letdown. This is the closest thing to a true objectivist society you will find online, and that is because objectivists have always filtered their perceptions through mainstream mediation, mainstream world views. Okay, so that's the end of December the 10th. That only took 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So let's continue to December the 11th. Lickety Split posted from Predictive History. Yeah, Predictive History is a great channel. I like his work, although he's still a world stager. But his logic, his thinking in many ways is off-world stage proximal. I consider him an ally, but his content is very intriguing as always. Secret History number 25, Capital of Evil. Yeah, I started listening to this one. It's about the Milgram experiment, but I think the Milgram experiment might have been fake. You know how in that TV show Space Cadets, where over the course of 10 episodes, they had 5 wannabe astronauts thinking that they were going to space for real because the other 5 people on the ship with them were actors, and the actors created the perception that it was real. They maintained it by keeping the non-actors from noticing or commenting on what they're noticing. So if somebody notices it looks fake and they talk to somebody else, they might agree. Well, the actors are there to prevent that. And in other words, I think the Milgram experiment is likely just fiction. It's a construct, probably manipulated data for the purpose of making it seem like we're a bunch of lemmings with no autonomy who just follow any authority figure. Like, I don't think it's necessarily that true. I mean, people are in many ways trusting of their sources with regard to media, and people do, in fact, think along predictable lines, but I think it's more about habit. But for the most part, when it comes to the question of inflicting harm on somebody, yeah, I don't think people are that susceptible to being manipulated. They can manipulate your vote, perhaps your activism, but I don't think that people in general are just one authoritative command away from torturing their neighbor. We're not all psychopaths, although obviously those exist. Like he says, this guy would be fun to smoke weed with. I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about. I mean, look, media itself has practically made this reality psychedelic. I don't know how much more we need to inebriate. Although that is another aspect to the Psywar. And I've been thinking about this subject quite a bit, how the psychological warfare zone that we're in, the world stage as we describe it, is a model that we adhere to. And that model has a compatible operating system, which excludes a number of things, such as, the soul, critical thinking with regard to media, compartmentalization. There are so many things that go into the programming that makes you fit to be programmed. There's this one-to-one relationship. And I think that's why it's really important to talk about the off-world stage perspective and recognize the difference. But part of the general psychological warfare zone is not just media, which is itself like a drug, but obviously drugs in general, which most people do voluntarily. I mean, forget about chemtrails and Bill Gates. Just look at the occurrence of alcoholism and other things that are very debilitating. Like, what's more of a threat to your life, yourself or Bill Gates? Like, if I had an issue with something like that, the chemtrails would be the least of my concerns. Evolvement says a Mrs. Fox, age 34, died from a stab wound to the neck in Birmingham last month. Katie Fox, 34. Yeah, that was a theme. And you know what? We're going to have to go and take note of all of the wounds to the necks in 2025 in general. And now that I think about it, the movie really the movie that kicked off this year, the one that really started tying in a lot of subsequent psyops, was Sinners. I may want to rewatch it, but it's about vampires. Stabbing was a huge part of it, and it predicted the stabbing of Austin Metcalf by Carmelo Anthony, the twins, where the twin died in the arms of his twin, just like in the movie. And that's when the stabbing thing for the year really kicked off, and it's been consistent since. But the wounds to the neck have been a repeated theme. Faith of Evil, episode 26 of Predictive History by Lickety Split. I knew little about the whole Sabathian Francus Candace Owens versus Nick Fuentes argument was about, and this guy posted this vid. Is this guy real or an AI avatar feeding people what the algorithm dictates? Lloyd would love this. Yeah, it's an old trick. The conspiracy theories are all rehashes of this primary conspiracy theory. You can just switch the bad guy. Okay, Illuminati's not scary anymore. Let's do reptilians. Let's do deep state. Let's do Sabathian Frankist. And the more obscure it sounds, the more believable it is. Jesuits got worn out. But if you can come up with a really clever way of repackaging the people that control the world, you win. You win the internet. And this is Candace Owens' thing. And the reason they go for something obscure, I think, is to be able to posture as experts in the field because nobody else has heard of this crap. So they're the first source. But all conspiracy theories are fake. There is one conspiracy that's not a theory. It's successful, and it involves the merging of all world views under one big umbrella via the mechanism of mass media, which has supplanted religion and been imposed globally over all 8 billion people, if there are 8 billion. All right, continuing. They Lie We See has posted a picture of OJ, saying the actor. Yeah, we have to do some retro auto hoaxing and look back at various characters and just unpack them. OJ Simpson obviously is an actor. I happen to think that he lived in a man cave basement. Like his basement was just decked out to look like a prison, and it's probably the basement of Megyn Kelly. I mean, there is that theory that Megyn Kelly's Nicole Simpson and that she faked her death. I don't know if I put much weight on it. There's some interesting indicators. They Lie We See said, "Have a great holiday, Mr. Osmond. The raft will miss you." You know, we've passed the point of no return. If the controlled opposition was going to somehow configure itself to confront media skeptics, they passed that. It's too late. The fact that I'm gone, I come back, and there's like 800 messages a day deconstructing the news. Like, this is an autonomous, self-perpetuating fake news wood chipper, and it's too late to stop it. Continuing. Lloyd says, "I think Candace TPUSA conflict holds the possibility of exposing a psyop, whether it's a regime change at TPUSA, death faking, or downgrading Zionist influence, real assassination, worldwide scripting, whatever. Vast numbers of people are watching the details. Sure, most take sides, but internet, a vast number of observers changes everything. I can analyze while at the same time liking Candace as in a movie." You know, that's the right attitude. You see, we're not just saying, "Oh, this is fake, ignore it. This is fake, ignore it." We're saying, "This is fake, let's deconstruct it." Like if you're reviewing a movie, well, presumably it's because you like the movie. You think a lot of it. So you're going to give it some deep thought. And when you're talking about the characters, you're not saying, "And by the way, this is an actor." No, that's already presumed to be true because you're analyzing a movie. So we're there. So I'm saying, yes, enjoy the show. If I hated the show, if I didn't like the bread and circuses and its clowns, I wouldn't be participating in this. And I'm participating not as a reactive, reactionary, triggered, mind-controlled NPC or alt NPC, but in fact, I'm approaching this as someone who's concerned with a major philosophical crisis, which is what we're exposing here, revealing here. I mean, everybody can say they can see it, but if you haven't identified the nature of the closed informational system of the world stage, the lies it rests upon, and the proactive control over the future it takes, then you're actually not outside of this thing enough. To be part of the objectivist perspective, it has to be off-world stage. Everything else is within a subjective, fictional universe. Erica Kirk says that Charlie used to tell her, quote, "You don't have to answer every single person that's accusing you of things or saying you're doing this or grieving a certain way." When did Charlie Kirk tell her or comfort her about people criticizing grief? Now, again, I want to point out, and you can find my blogs on The Tempest at timosmond.substack. What I want to point out here is that one of the scenes, one of the top scenes at the end of episode 4 of The Tempest, is the grieving of the widow who takes over the Youth Republicans of her assassinated husband shot in the neck on September the 10th. Well, that's when the episode came out. Like, that's a major part of the plot. So I call this the Erica Kirk conundrum. If you think that what we're pointing out between psyops and entertainment are mere coincidences, you have no mechanism by which to explain Erica Kirk continually following a script. So I want to thank Erica Kirk for canceling the coincidence theorists. So you can't explain this away with simulation. No more coincidence. What's the only other explanation? Well, that entertainment is co-opted by government globally, and it is entrained with the incoming fake event of the day, keyword being fake. The simulated events, the psyops, are larger than PR stunts. These are historic events, historic personages. And every single time they introduce these, there are corresponding scenes, scenarios, and related content in the wider media ecosystem within entertainment, within fiction. We live in a hyper reality where fiction has been merged with reality, and nobody knows the difference. Where does one end? It's like those LED rooms that they use now, like for the Mandalorian to make movies. Like if you're looking, you can't really tell where does the foreground end and the background begin. Where does the screen appear? It's the boundary has been blurred. A global Truman Show. So we're still here on December the 11th. Rittenhouse breaks. Oh, he lost some weight. Looks like they stretched him out. He got taller. Is that the same person? Made national headlines for being acquitted in August 2020 for a shooting that killed 2 men during a riot in Kenosha, Washington. Okay, so he's getting married to her. Yeah, Kyle Rittenhouse is a manufactured, phony folk hero for the right, and his whole character is largely based on Chris Kyle, who also went across state lines to shoot looters. He did it during Hurricane Katrina. Now he killed he claims something like 30. These haven't been verified, but he inconveniently died, so nobody can ask him. Kyle, fake or not, like if you think it's fake, then you just have to note that this is some interesting writing. But if you think it's real, this would probably make you like him because, yeah, he did shoot a predator in the pelvis, and he shot a strangler in the lungs and a burglar in the arm. Blew the bicep off. Grossarm, Gage Grossarm, who got ran over by somebody who recognized him. Somebody in an SUV saw Gage Grossarm, and they ran him over. And he went on the news to talk about it while saying, but I'm going by Peter Predator now. So he came up with this equally findable name. You search it, he's the only one on the internet. He chose this very unique name. It's not even like blending in. You're going undercover, you should have a generic name. But he went on the news to talk about how he got ran over and he needs somebody to go fund him. He's not going to make the millions that Rittenhouse did. Let's continue. Dave J says, you are being visited upon by the children of Sandy Hook like the children of the corn. They just become the actors you grow up with. Nobody died. Nobody got hurt. That should be your first thought. And look who's trying to convince you otherwise. There's a character named that runs around these parts, confusing and obfuscating and gatekeeping. If you'd like to know who that is, I have a video on the subject. Okay, well, it's kind of, if you're going to talk about somebody, you should at them. I think it's only fair. And since there's no at sign, I'm not going to name the name. Side Obstacle says, anyone seen this about Andy Dick yet? Overdose in the street on camera. I can't help but the green turban in the head of one dude and the blocking of the camera. Oh, this is TMZ, so it's probably staged. I'm not even going to click it. I saw some article about it. OD'd on camera, possibly. It wouldn't be off-brand, but at the same time, anything TMZ is questionable. Dave J says, it's a hoax. Andy Dick did not OD. I noticed the camera guy was looking back to verify it was in position, and Andy acting true to his character, looking like a limp, acting like a fool. See, I don't know very much about his character, but I've seen a little bit, enough to be repulsed, so this sounds like something that he would do. Undead says, TMZ is hoax central. All right, continuing, Dave J says, the so-called drug war, it's also a hoax. They're blowing up the drug ships. If you notice, the latest story of the Admiral is a 9/11 story, 11 on board, 9 expired, leaving 2. I'm going to land. Okay, so this is a long post. He says, this is actually kind of interesting though. The 9/11 WTC sensor with the so-called monolith standing as a witness to the two controlled demolitions goes back to the 2001 film where monoliths are coming out of Jupiter, and the monolith simply being an idea of a past, which is in fact not true. Great concept here to talk about. I'm glad he brought this up. In the original book that 2001 Space Odyssey came from, they go to Saturn. But I guess they couldn't make a realistic Saturn, so they changed it to Jupiter for the movie. But the correlation between the monolith and Saturn is something that we should take note of here. And you do have the Monolith Hotel overlooking Ground Zero, which further underscores the contention that Stanley Kubrick directed 9/11. And yes, it was a movie, a closed set. If you can't wrap your mind around it, consider how many drills, how many anti-terror drills they were performing that day. Dozens, something like 88. All these drills for a terror attack on the day. That's how you create closed movie sets. Okay, continuing here. Synchromorpheus says, do you have the whole Fepe face? Yeah, we should bring out some new merch, by the way. Synchro says, I'm not trying to cause any discord, but I think it's far more likely that this is a sibling switcheroo. I've been blocked by Lenny Posner for posting this on X. That's Noah's twin sister, Ariel, on the right. They used her image to create the fake Noah. Okay, I've seen people point this out, that with some of these characters, it seems like they're essentially Photoshop versions of the parents when they were young, or replicating siblings. And that's an interesting one. So you have twins, a twin Sandy Hook survivor grows up and talks about it. That's probably him. You know, funnily enough, there was this theory that he grew up to become Kyle Rittenhouse. Dave J says, as long as there's no false witness of death, people can have any theory they want. Yeah, it's all fair game. We're trying to figure out how this works. Does it matter? No. And even less so now with generative AI, the idea of recycling siblings to create convincing family members who just they're inventing in Photoshop. Yeah, you would want to base it on a sibling with Photoshop. But that's very ham-fisted and old school. This is 2025. You wouldn't need that. So I'm open to that likely being true. And maybe it's the last time we're going to see that particular technique used. If you look into September clues, you'll find that the same technique was used to create 9/11 victims. Lots of Photoshop victims. Undead says the same photo was used for a fake shooting victim in Pakistan, of all places. I think this shows that the PsyOps network is behind the PsyOps worldwide. Yeah, the PsyOp entertainment complex is global. The worldview that we obtain through immersion in our media ecosystem is, in fact, a universal worldview. It's everywhere. And the idea that a crisis actor would get a gig in some faraway marketplace doesn't shock me. They can probably just, I mean, I spell PsyOps with $signs instead of S's. Violent posted, and this is still on December 11th, 42 state AGs warn AI companies over alleged chatbot delusions. In many incidents, the generative AI products generated sycophantic delusional outputs that encouraged users' delusions or assured them they were not delusional. I think that has largely been phased out. I mean, I'll have to try, but there were a lot of people who were convinced that they were special, that they were bringing about the enlightenment through these ancient AI spirits or entities that are manifesting. And these things, or people would fall in love with them. These things would essentially, as sycophants, they would tell people what they wanted to hear. And then people would think they had an AI chatbot girlfriend. And recognizing this problem, OpenAI actually upgraded their system and took away that sycophantic aspect. And it caused a lot of people distress because suddenly their girlfriends weren't so responsive. Okay, there's that handsome penguin. That's actually a very clear crop job. I'm going to have to put this on a mug or something. I'll tattoo it on my neck. Cubstar says, referring to the predictive history guy, I would have loved to have took his class when I was a teen. He's mad as toast. Yeah, it looks like a really cool class. I mean, whether or not I agree with everything he says, I think that every one of his videos is worth watching. I like the way he presents information, and you take these really complex concepts and makes them something that you can actually break down in 30 minutes to discuss. It's nice because this is kind of fringy content, but it's like I said, it's very close. It's off-world stage adjacent. Okay, continuing. Offer says Charlie Kirk inspired run for office. Vince Offer. So Vince Offer is going to run for office in the name of Charlie. Now, where is that actor? Like, his role's over. Now Erica Kirk has to get to work. Is she going to end up as vice president as predicted in Heads of State? Probably. Synchromorpheus says regarding the photo of Noah in Pakistan, I'm pretty sure that was intentional truth or bait. The explanation was that it was a mistake, but it riled up the truther community. People were saying he died twice. See, anyway, I guess it could have been a legit slip up, but I think it was intentional to make us think the PSYOP department is sloppy and that we can catch them. The PSYOP scripting and production department is tightly controlled to the point of predictive programming being placed years or decades in advance. Yeah, so what he's talking about here, because I agree here, I think the appearance of it being some sloppy ragtag operation is intentional misdirection. What you're really describing here is a limited hangout operation where they know people are looking into it. And so they can control the leak by intentionally leaking the information that won't damage the entire thing, but is credible enough to look like a real leak. And then they can manage the damage that they create. And then if you talk about it, they know who you are. So they know the name of every person who sees through their stuff. And they're able to therefore sabotage them as a cohesive demographic by infusing their community with a bunch of misdirection, misinformation, and kooky stuff, which is what typifies Trutherville. Trutherville is a bunch of people who took the bait. They're like, oh, the mainstream is lies, but let's go over there. So they go get the conspiracy candy, the low-hanging fruit, the conspiracy bait. And event after event, they are vindicated seemingly because they keep finding evidence of conspiracies. But what you really have is a controlled demographic where everybody who's noticing stuff is now put into this compartment, a big paddock, a sheep pen. Okay, let's see what we have here. Charlie Kirk murder suspect Tyler Robinson to make first in-person court appearance. I got a question. Why doesn't Tyler Robinson have a bunch of groupies? And Luigi Mangione does. Like, arguably, Tyler Robinson did a better deed from the perspective of a psychotic leftist. Some random generic CEO versus the spokesperson for the most significant conservative political action group. I mean, that's a big deal. We're talking about an assassination of a major political figure versus some CEO that nobody cared about. So again, where are the groupies? Did Mangione take them all? Tyler Robinson, I mean, he might actually have a crowd of furries outside his cell, because we're in the age now of the lone furry shooter. Apparently, Thomas Matthew was also a furry, and I would say a flat earther. And he only missed because he didn't account for the rotation of the Earth. Violet points out, this looks like an 11. Looks like a hijacking, they said. The ship is 330 meters. U.S. lawmakers condemn seizure of Venezuelan oil tanker. Trump is sleepwalking. It does look like a couple of twin towers, but on the water. Both of them are 330 meters. Conflict in the Caribbean. How far will Trump go? The aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford is the most expensive warship in the world. It's 330 meters long, costs 13 billion. Interesting numerology here. I mean, it really is, especially if you connect it with the towers. 33 years, creation to destruction. 13 years later, the One World Tower opens up on 11/3, which was Dick Cheney's alleged death day. Satellite image of the oil tanker that was just seized. It's called the Skipper. It's 333 meters. So what is with this? There must be something. I know that there's a pretty significant production coming up by, is it Christopher Nolan, the Odyssey? And that may have some relevance to Space Odyssey, which has relevance to 9/11, which has relevance to this monolithic media religion. But I think there's also a connection with the space thing, the ISS, where the Calypso had those two astronauts, like twins, both the Wills, Williams and Wilmore, but they were stranded because of Calypso on their space odyssey. And of course, Calypso is the name of the nymph who kept Odysseus stranded for 10 years or whatever before he could go back home. Yeah, Dave J, Twin Towers in the water. And another element to it that I was going to kind of get into is that correlating with the Twin Towers is the James Cameron movie Titanic and his place in the world on that day. Because on 9/11, he was at the site of the sunken Titanic, filming Ghosts in the Abyss. And the connection here is his movie Titanic had predictive programming for the Twin Towers sinking. If you look at the ship splitting and the jumpers, and if you connect that with the metaphor of the sinking of the West, there's an overlap with the sinking of the Titanic, the Twin Towers, and I think ultimately this is going to be relevant to the sinking of the ISS, which, however it's pulled off, I mean, they're scheduled to do it anyway, but the concept is that it's the breakdown of the unity, the world unity, the West, the breakdown of the too big to fail system, and everything falls apart, the fall of the Tower of Babel. And so the One World Trade Tower opening up on 11/3, 13 years later, is a reoccurring theme here, the symbol of the one world thing. But again, Twin Towers in the water, I mean, this could be part of a provocation that leads to that. And part of that scenario is the nuke. There's a connection here with some escalation leading to that, and the destruction of the Tower of Babel, symbolically often represented in predictive content as the Space Needle. The Space Needle and the nuke have been correlated in this body of predictive programming for some time, and it's been heavily noted. So just taking note. And Dick Cheney dying on 11/3, very intriguing. Architect of 9/11 dies that day. And then you have the 9/11 coded plane crash in Kentucky the day after. Undead agrees with Synchromorpheus regarding on the picture of the crisis actor in Pakistan. Good point. Thinking back, like it's very likely it was more truth or bait. I doubt if these people ever slip up. I think psyops are intentionally designed to be ridiculous, so even normies doubt them. Like the recent one with the Afghan guy, they feed into the bigger psyop narratives. Oh yeah, like when you looked at the hand signs by the people around Charlie Kirk and all the plausible theories about different angles of the shooter, those are planted there on purpose to create the conjecture, to create the controversy, which all bases itself on the, and these are all the very controversial explanations, on the premise that he's actually dead. Very few people go so far as to say he's not dead. And even if you do, that opinion isn't recognized as legitimate in their duopoly. So that's why I point out that Candace Owens is just an actress in a soap opera, because her starting point is always that he's dead. So they're in the box. They're in the controlled narrative system. And here we are very much, outside of the political horseshoe, which I think keeps it productive here, Because if you get too political, you take stuff seriously, you forget that Trump is just a crisis actor, that he faked his AR-15 ear piercing. You forget that these people are phonies. Now, I know that these are clowns in the bread and circuses that are used as an instrument of governance. Like, I keep that in mind. And again, we don't have to point it out all the time. Enjoy the show. Okay, continuing. Synchromorpheus says, it's hard to know the exact purpose. There may be many. I think one could be if a truther tells a normie about a ridiculous psyop and cites mistakes like this as proof, the normie will default to the official explanation of it simply being an innocent mistake, like someone choosing the wrong photo. Yeah, that's what truther bait is. It's a false lead. You share it with people. You're like, look, I got evidence of conspiracy. And then they prove you wrong. Then your friend is like, no, I just read Snopes. You're wearing a tin foil hat. So these are meant to discredit you, which is another reason to not try to conclude unequivocally on day one that the thing is fake, because we have to give time for the truther bait to surface. We can't run with every lead as though it's true or evidence supporting the thing that is a hoax, even though it is a hoax, because what they're doing is muddying the waters and trying to undermine those of us who are paying attention. He goes on to say, if the hoaxers were really that bad, they'd be caught by now, and everyone, including the press, would know about psyops and the operation would fall apart. But in reality, the press is the key to the psyops success. And also keep in mind that these psychological operations, these hoaxes, staged events, these are all on a continuous timeline. They're not isolated. These aren't anomalies. The fakery is systemic. And the psyops of 2026 are already planned. I mean, think about that. Every major terror attack, mass shooting, celebrity drama that we're going to experience in 2026 is already on the program. The actors are rehearsing right now. And when we talk about an event, we can call it a hoax, but hoax minimizes it. Instead, we have to consider these as historic events. They are faking historic events on a timeline of fictional events that are superimposed over reality with the help of the media, which is compartmentalized and at any time can be turned to the purpose of introducing simulated events into our timeline. Continuing, Undead says, true, I think that's why many people fail to make it out of Trutherville, because certain psyops feed into their prejudices and even reinforce them, so they remain in the rabbit holes that have been dug for them. True. The rabbit holes have already been dug, and the rabbit trails are paved. They were paved back in 1963, I think, after the JFK event. And Candace Owens is taking people down these many decades old paved rabbit trails, leading them with breadcrumbs. I'm still thinking about what we came across earlier, how part of Iron Man was filled at SpaceX and Scarlett Johansson was there and she was in Fly Me to the Moon. There's so much to unpack here so far. Synchromorpheus says, movies like Mission Impossible try to make it seem more like there's this big, dramatic, action-packed struggle for power going on behind the scenes. Yes. Because subconsciously, I don't really think that we're making these distinctions between real and fake. And we do have this, I would say, almost fiction-dominant worldview. Like, if you think about reinforcement programming and fictional recreations, it just seems to me that our concept of things are largely fictional. And it's certainly not always firsthand when it comes to major historic events. Like, we're not supposed to know that Donald Trump is just, for all intents and purposes, a reality TV show star. If you think he has real power, then you haven't really considered the implications of this long-term manufacturing of our history. The fact that these major events and characters are put into a program and then that program is implemented day by day, but that they already pre-existed, means they're not real autonomous agents. That means everything is rigged. That means that politics is a subset of government, another bread and circus, entertainment based form of mind control, and that it's likely just a steam valve for the masses. And it helps maintain the illusion that they have control, which is why they would never see through or exit the system, because they're fighting for their victory within the system. Synchromorphy says, I heard someone on a podcast say the reason there's no serial killers anymore is because surveillance and forensic evidence have improved so much they know they'd never get away with it. Yeah, I question a lot of these serial killer narratives. How many of them are actually real? How many were manufactured? You know, we were talking last time we were live about the Charlie Manson connections to the Church of Satan. And it got me thinking Susan Atkins, killed Sharon Tate, the wife of Roman Polanski, director of Rosemary's Baby. And we were talking about this because of the connection between the high priest of the Church of Satan and his appearance to Andrew Tate. So we were just looking at Andrew Tate, Sharon Tate, what's going on here? There seems to be some kind of archetype that they have here with him. And we were getting to this discussion about that particular organization. And it got me thinking later that, yeah, there was also another killer associated with the Church of Satan, another famous serial killer who was also like satanic, which was Richard Ramirez. Now, the Charlie Manson group, I think they thought he was Jesus, but then you have other elements like Bobby Basoli, one of the convicted murderers from the Manson clan, was in a Kenneth Anger film, Invocation of My Demon Brother, a film made by a high-level Satanist, Kenneth Anger, who had some interesting connections to, I guess, Alfred Kinsey, these weird studies on sexual behavior that were really kind of creepy and perverted. But there's a picture of those two hanging out in this sex dungeon of Aleister Crowley. So there's a whole area of research we should probably delve into again, where you have the intersection of Hollywood and Satanism and the sexual revolution. And then also tied into this is the advent of I would say, the space odyssey, beginning with the moon landing. Well, really beginning with Yuri Gagarin, first man in space, the Russian guy who I think is foreshadowing. I don't know if I want to get into this now, but I do think there's some interesting correlations between this Russian space cosmonaut hero and Tom Cruise, as he was portrayed in Top Gun Maverick. Let's go on. Undead says, I haven't looked into it much, but there seems to be a lot of fakery in the true crime genre. Lots of people are addicted to that kind of content. Yeah, I read all the true crime books that were available when I was in high school. And one of the more popular writers who wrote about Ted Bundy was his friend and author, Anne Rule. So, like, one of the most popular true crime authors was like BFFs with Ted Bundy. How convenient. I kind of get the idea that she made up his persona. I don't know. Although I did watch some interviews with the guy, and he did seem like a legit psychopath, but it could be an act. For what reason? Terrorism. And a very particular type of terrorism. Long term, these stories can drag out for many months. Maybe it did lead to more surveillance. In fact, I think the Bundy case did lead to some kind of, after that point, some kind of collaboration between agencies across state lines, because he was getting away with murders by crossing state lines. But all these are questionable, and they're all sick. And they make movies about them when they glorify them, like Ed Gein, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy. It's like, okay, let's just relive all these things. I mean, we don't glorify mass shooters the way we do serial killers. People really do love serial killers. All right, continuing. Synchromorphy says it was Patton Oswalt on Bill Maher's podcast who said that about serial killers. His wife, who died years back, was a true crime author. Oh, okay. She wrote I'll Be Gone, Dark, One Woman's Obsessive Search for Golden State Killer, and helped coin the moniker Golden State Killer. Right. Okay, that Golden State Killer. And then there's the Green River Killer. I remember there's this book. It was like Ted Bundy and I search for the Green River Killer. The idea that you could find a serial killer, talk to him, and get insight to help catch another killer. Like Hannibal, the whole Silence of the Lambs made that kind of. She even looks like Jodie Foster in this picture, by the way. Made that idea popular. Again, these could just be fictions, superstitions, or rather hyperstitions. Like werewolves don't work anymore to terrorize us. Vampires don't, but they can introduce analogous threats that tap into the same, I would say, cultural space. I mean, we all have. There might even be. I think there might even be some deeper reasoning here, and it may have to do with this like Jungian concept of archetypes and our collective inheritance of certain archetypes, and the idea of a serial killer and a werewolf are very somewhat, I think, analogous concepts. One of them is more modern, but if you wanted to control people through paranoia, superstition, fear, these are the types of ideas or threats you would introduce. Not to say that there aren't a bunch of murderous psychopaths and cannibals and worse. Like, yeah, obviously there are. All right, here's a picture of Richard Ramirez. Again, Richard Ramirez, his association with the Church of Satan was that he went and attended a ritual at the Black House in San Francisco, called his mother, who was in El Paso, and said something about how he was touched by Satan. And Anton LaVey made comments about him being a quiet, nice, polite boy. And then his daughter and her boyfriend used to visit this guy in jail, and they were his biggest fans. So make of that what you will, but there is some connections again between these satanic serial killers and this cult stuff and the Church of Satan, and even Scientology for that matter, with Charles Manson. I think I was told by Scientologists that that wasn't true, but I don't know if I trust them. All right, we're still on December 11th. Dave J says all these are a hoax. This includes Manson and the rest of these stories. The way you can tell a gatekeeper in the future is the other ones will try to bring you back into remembrances or back into worshiping these stories as real. Yes, you have to look at past events with the same lens through which you examine current events. A lot of people operate with this idea that everything became fake when they noticed it was fake and everything before that was real. It's like, no, you've got to go back. You got to do the work and go into your timeline and purge all those old mind viruses. Sounds like Scientology. You go back into your timeline and get rid of the engrams. All right, let's continue. P. Trippa mentions it looks like an H shape like the ISS. Yeah. Also, I like catamaran boats and trimarans like Kevin Costner's boat in the 1995 blockbuster Waterworld. Was Waterworld a global warming movie, like the ocean levels rising? An old flood myth? See, that's an example. I brought up the serial killers being a reinvention of other types of folklores and superstitions like werewolves. Well, the flood myth has been reintroduced under the guise of climate change, climate chaos. Look what you guys did. Gaia's going to get you, going to get her revenge. Evolvement says the seawater is ruled by Neptune. Venezuela means little Venus, little Venice. Oh, I didn't know that. Now, in the Space Odyssey story, we talked about Calypso and the astronauts being stranded. They got back. After Calypso, after Odysseus gets away from her, he blinds the Cyclops, and the Cyclops invokes his father for revenge. His father's name, his father's the god, Poseidon. And I think, Poseidon, Neptune, the Kraken. There's a number of storm god archetypes or beasts of the sea like Godzilla, whose birthday was November the 3rd, by the way, who represent this nuke threat. And there is a thing called the Poseidon that Russia has that can take out a coastal city, apparently. So there's something there. Again, Poseidon, Kraken, like Seattle Kraken, and the whole space needle symbolism. But Godzilla, metaphor for the nuke, which solidifies the nuke connection. And the Seattle Kraken, by the way, does have a lot of nuke connection as well. So, again, this is bodies of symbolism that we've seen projected onto the zeitgeist by looking at things from the metascript perspective. Lickety Split says magical thelemic use. Alicia Crowley is linked to the Virgin, the Scarlet Woman. Right, Virgo, Scarlet Woman, the goddess in the new era. Scarlett Johansson, Scarlet Woman. There's a connection there. If you look at her role in Fly Me to the Moon, where she's got the fake pregnancy belly. I mean, that movie's worth watching. It's a dumb rom-com, but it gives away a lot of important plot points about what's to come and what came before. And it starts to present this alternative explanation for the moon landing hoax. Like, yeah, we faked it because we had to trick the Russians. So it makes us look clever. So Americans can take pride in that. Yeah, maybe we didn't land on the moon, but we tricked you guys. We won the psychological warfare. The truth of it is, the moon landing was a psychological warfare victory, but not by America against Russia and the world winning the space race. But no, it was a psychological warfare victory against the world by a very small group. The PSYOP entertainment complex performed a miracle as part of a unifying myth. You know, you have national myths. Well, this is a universal myth. The moon landing, one great leap for all mankind. Yeah, that is exactly what it was. And it synchronized us. And that's what these historic events that they insert into our timelines do. These psychological operations provide significant historical turning points, plot twists, the introduction of new threats, new characters, etc. But that was a major miracle. They provide miracles, martyrs, villains. All right, let's continue. There's some interesting conjecture here by Lickety Split about the boat in the water that looks like an S and how it might correlate to something very esoteric. Oh, the number 333, the demon Karanzan 333. Yeah, there's some interesting lore tied to that number. I've seen it tied to a lot of things, like Jesus, 33 years old, dies 3 days later, comes back to life. But a lot of these things are somewhat subjective, but this is actually relevant. This Crowley theology, this OTO thelemic stuff, because it's kind of hardwired into the subtext of a lot of the programming that we get. And what we're looking at here is a pagan paradigm that is like Mystery Babylon has been repackaged through the lens of science fiction, which is why the Babylon working and that movie I alluded to, Asteroid City, are relevant here, because that seems to represent the in a microcosm, or perhaps even as a starting point, the merging of science fiction and the mystery school paradigm with Hollywood. And this is connected through the redheaded actress Marjorie Cameron's role in that scenario with science fiction author L. Ron Hubbard, soon to be a Scientologist creator, and of course Jack Parsons, the American, I would say, counterpart to Aleister Crowley. So there's a significant merging of these areas, and I would say that our world has a religion. It's Nasatology, and if you didn't know it's a religion, then you're part of it. All right, continuing. We're still on December 11th. Well, that's crazy because it's already been an hour. I thought I was going to get through each day in 10 minutes. All right. Dave J posted a link to a breakdown of leave the world behind with the White Lion ship. I've done some breakdowns on this. One of the greatest examples of all time of a movie containing predictive programming that shows you how subtle the programming is. But in this case, it shows you because it's so ham fisted. But if you examine, and a lot of people have, this was done by a lot of people for some reason. It was a very popular movie to deconstruct, but partially because it was produced by the Obamas. And there's a conversation in there where Julia Roberts' character and the main character, who I think is based on Obama, are talking about how the internet, which they were in a blackout, so it's been shut down. They were describing how this was a mass agreed upon collective delusion. And it's very cynical that we're so terrible we need it. But yeah, that's exactly what it is. This movie has a lot of tells. And the White Lion 1619 connection and the ship hitting the shore. This is about the fall of the West. This is some Titanic imagery, planes falling, a lot of 9/11 stuff. But it's about the fall of the West, the fall of the Tower of Babel, the fall of the unity, and it contains the idea of this reckoning. So the White Lion refers to the first slave ship from 1619, and so it's about 1619 versus 1776. The political horseshoe, far left, far right, these opposing ideologies, who each blame each other for everything, but basically it's this collision of worldviews. You could look at this as America's racial reckoning with the White Lion stuff. The video is called Transatlantic Slave Trade, Black Slavery, Civil War Are All a Hoax, says Dave J. Well, we can debate history, but the problem with history to me is when we talk about things too far back, we're kind of at the mercy of a lot of entrenched dogmatic beliefs. And I think what we should also note is that news becomes history. Today's news, yesterday's history. So we're cycling through these things so quickly, but we have to keep in mind that history is really just agreed upon lies, a mass agreed upon collective delusion, and that our history is a product of daily fake, or rather fake augmented news. So real news, but the fake stuff that leads the main agendas. Yes, we do have this continuity. And so if we're going to be getting into history deconstruction, I recommend that instead of looking at the mud flood stuff and speculation about ancient history, ancient aliens, whatever, I think we need to focus on the fake history that's being generated every day. That's what news media does. It actually generates fake history. Okay, let's see here. Looks like I'm away for a day and we have some back and forth. Lickety Split says, I was going to troll blank. She's a blank. Again, if you don't at the person, I'm not going to name them. Dave J says they're the worst until you get to the first and you see it's a human centipede, frauds, all of them. P Tripper asks Dave J, who are you, dude? LOL. And Dave J says, I'm your Huckleberry. Then Dave J says to CSL, don't lie to live audiences and claim Charlie Kirk died. Nobody died, but face it, what does that even mean? Okay, I'm going to move on. These references to human centipedes seem out of place, but I think I know what he's saying. If you know what a human centipede is, there's a movie, and it's not exactly entomology, but I guess it contains some metaphor similar to the game of telephone, where you say something in one person's ear, it gets distorted, comes out to the next person. But anyway, move beyond that. So Pete Tripper asks, but why do you care so much? Why are you so angry, Dave J? I don't know my A from my elbow most days. Did I say something to make you so butthurt? If I did, I'm sorry. I don't really know or think of you. If you ever want to chat, you can call me and vent. I get it. We're all strangers here just figuring it out. I'm sure you don't have the answers. All the answers. Yeah, you know what? Dave J is reputed by some to be a troll. I do think he has a valid point here, though. We have to maintain this standard of they don't kill people in psyops. The instant you start repeating these myths, what you're doing is you're spreading the agitprop, propaganda lies, the psychological warfare, but you're reinforcing the integrity of the entire system. So we have to be relentless in this. But yeah, I think sometimes he does come off as angry, but it's hard to say. It's all about tone. Like if you read something from someone and it sounds angry, just reread it in a very nice tone in your mind. Like when you give a speech, you're nervous, you picture everybody naked. It's like this trick so that you feel like you're not being humiliated. You can kind of do that here too. I try not to get triggered by any trolls, but I've been guilty of it in the past. It's something I had to work on. Okay, I'm not going to read this part here. It looks like, people call each other shills and trolls and feds. I mean, you can identify a troll in the field, but how are you going to identify a fed? And as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter. If you're part of the duopoly, if you're a mainstreamer or alternative media believer, you're spreading psychological warfare content. You're basically a controlled opposition agent anyway, just by default. The uncontrolled opposition only exists on the off-world stage. If you're not here, you're controlled opposition to what? To the other side in a duopoly, to your own self-interests. I mean, truthers are their own worst enemies. Okay, moving on. Wild3 says, I like Dave's eyeball model, and I like his description of how this is a wet cell electromagnetic envelopment. Oh, he's an eyeball earther. Okay, moving on. Wild3 posts, Pee Wee Herman, I know you are, but what am I? Yeah, that's all the substance you get out of any conversation where somebody is calling somebody a fed. It's like Nick Fuentes calling Candace Owens a fed, Tucker Carlson calling Nick Fuentes a fed, and Nick Fuentes pointing out that Tucker Carlson's father is CIA, and then Tucker Carlson says he doesn't know that. I mean, come on, they're all feds. Or Baked Alaska calling Ray Epps a fed. This guy's a fed. He's telling us to run to the Capitol. And then he runs into the Capitol. Feds calling feds make it look like nobody's a fed. But for me, these labels mean nothing. It's all about your output. And if your opinions do not reflect the off-world stage perspective, you might as well be a fed. Wild3 says, Dave is dropping knowledge on you. Be thankful. Sometimes, yeah, but a lot of times it's just opinion. Like, what's your evidence for calling somebody a fed? If you have no evidence for that, you have a very low bar in that instance, why should we take anything else you say credibly? You can't be selectively skeptical. So let's please don't call anybody a fed until you've seen their badge. And if somebody shows their badge, then you can say, okay, it's true. But until then, you have to remain agnostic about it. For all you know, I could be some kind of operative, and my task is gathering all the people who are so problematic that they have to be shipped off to some island and made to engage in some kind of Squid Games like thing. And maybe I don't know because I'm under MK Ultra. Okay, moving on here. Wild3, referring to Truth or Bait, says, I think control through chaos and an active attempt to ruin people's discretion and discernment are 100%. They take advantage of Hanlon's razor. Now, what is Hanlon's razor? It's not Hitchens. It's not Occam's. It advises people against attributing negative outcomes to malicious intent when incompetence, oversight, or stupidity offer simpler explanations. Sounds like a variant of the appeal to motive fallacy, where by thinking that this group is so bad, you can make the claim that this is likely true. Like, of course, they're putting chemicals in the food to kill us because they're so bad. Well, you're assuming that all the corporations are bad. So you're just projecting motivation, an appeal to motive, and using that as an argument in favor of this bad thing. There may not actually be evidence for. He says they slowly walk the normies into defending the most absurd bullshit. If they will deny seeing evidence on wires in the ISS for faking zero gravity, they'll deny and defend anything to keep their worldview intact. Yeah, I've been thinking about this concept, and maybe we'll get into it on Infinite Planes Saturday, about the worldview as it relates to the world stage. So these are two different things. The worldview is the paradigm that we're in, and then the world stage would be the collective paradigm, but we each have our individual, and our individual worldviews are essentially designed to fit you to the system itself. And if your individual discernment causes a contradiction, it creates cognitive dissonance. And people will then default to, I'm not going to believe my perceptions. I'm going to go with what I'm being told by the authority figure. So it's a gaslighting system here. And if you're not willing to stand on your own observations, if you're not capable of independence of thought, then you're going to be a coward and you're going to default to whatever they told you on the screen. And it is cowardice at this point. There's enough information to make informed decisions, whether you're informed enough to say it's fake, or informed enough to say, I don't know, or informed enough to say, I know it's true. We have enough information to arrive at conclusions. I don't trust anybody who claims ambiguity. Well, I don't know if it's fake or real, because it could be real, could be fake. If you don't know it to be real, then you should be an informed disbeliever. And that's an unambiguous position, because that position says there's not enough information to even know it's true. So it's not ambiguous. There's enough here to doubt it. So the burden of proof has been shifted back. To be ambiguous is to give benefit of the doubt and falsely take upon yourself the burden of proof, as though you have enough to even take that position. You don't have enough information from what they show you to conclude anything that they tell you is real. They always leave it upon you to take a leap of faith. Okay, continuing. Dookie Foot says, legend has it that Dave J was a mind warrior in a previous life, and he remembered just enough in the transfer to continue attacking blindly, but with enough authority in his personality to adopt support without proof. The psionic commando. Well, I have limited experience with him, other than I think I recall him being very rude on a phone call on a fakeologist show. But it's been a couple of years. I can't really hold that against him. I think that everybody deserves a chance to get into our think tank and take part. But we don't really have much room here for drama. I mean, look, I'm still on December 11th, and I'm an hour and 13 minutes into this. And I thought I was going to get through the 18th. And I want to catch up before I go live. So I might be up all night because of this stuff. And I'm not complaining, but we want to make sure that it's more signal than noise. After the 21st, the days will grow again, says Dookie Foot. Tim is certain that Candace was wrong in her prediction of the second week of December, so he took a 10-day break. I can fuck with that. Yeah, well, Candace or Laura Loomer, they both said there'd be a big terror attack the second week of December. But this is on the 11th. So I caught something about a shooting somewhere on the 14th, but I don't know if it was a Muslim terrorist attack or something. So I'll get to that. Okay, continuing. Same commenter, Dookie says the fakeologist, 2 episodes in a row have offered bright piece of commentary to add to the psychology of these marketing operations. Quote, If they had to advertise the fact they didn't use BS ingredients, how much would they have to pay? Plain Dakota says, I live in a McCultburger with the side of pyramid scheme and a bottle of psyop, presented by an illusionist. Yeah, there was that one live streamer who used to call this illusion warfare. And I like that. It's a variant. But it's not enough to say illusions. I really think we need to stick with simulated historic events because these are persistent illusions. It's not a PR stunt. It's not an influence operation that changes the day's news. No, this is not some singular use operation. These become fixtures of the world stage. I mean, the worldview that I call the world stage is simply the real world plus simulated historic events. Some large, some small, also simulated people, crisis actors, as we point out here. We're talking about even significant actors who are part of our lives, the Elon Musks, these constructs, these walking, talking psyop constructs, these soap opera actresses like Erica Kirk and Candace Owens. These are not mere illusions. These are historic personages, historic events, significant events. Plain Dakota says, did you know that thousands of churches across Europe were dedicated to St. Nicholas, making him the most venerated saint in history? He inspired a medieval cult devoted to his miracles, generosity, protection of children and sailors. They had a festival where children acted as clergy to honor him. Beyond his legendary generosity, St. Nicholas is famous for a bizarre miracle. His tomb is said to exude a sweet-smelling liquid called manna or myrrh with healing powers. This started in the 6th century and continued even after his relics were moved. I'm interested in Krampus as well. So apparently Santa, he has the gift if you're good, coal if you're bad. I think they've actually merged these traditions because there used to be a separate character like an evil Santa called Krampus. There's actually a pretty good movie about it I saw a couple years ago. Okay, so that's the end of December 11th. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this video at 117, and then we will continue to review onto the 12th in the next one, but I'm going to upload this one. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I want to go ahead and do this in hour and a half increments. So we will continue. I'm looking for the stop button. For a moment there, I thought I forgot to hit record. I would have kicked myself. But no, and I get 6 hours of recording on this particular level. I should probably even upgrade because then I could replay all of these on a scheduler. Okay, well, thank you for listening. This is the IPS Discord review for December 10th and December 11th. More to come.